So what if the solution to one of the most common, most frustrating gut problems wasn't some brand new chemical, but instead a clever way to hack a system that's already running inside our bodies? Today, we're diving into the science of a drug called Elobixibat, which does exactly that by tweaking a hidden pathway our body uses every single day.
So here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll get a handle on just how big of a problem this is. Then we'll get into the really cool, kind of surprising solution that comes from our own biology. After that, we'll dig into the hard data, what the studies actually say. We'll weigh the good against the bad, and finally, we'll see what this all means for treatment going forward.
All right, first things first, let's just talk about the scale of this problem. And listen, we're not talking about a minor inconvenience here. For a lot of people, chronic constipation is this relentless daily struggle, especially when all the usual treatments just stop working.
Yeah, this is no niche condition. Check this out. About 1 in 7 adults globally deals with this. Just think about that for a second. That is a huge number of people, and for them, it seriously impacts their day-to-day quality of life.
And to be really clear, we're not just talking about some occasional discomfort. We're zooming in on the toughest of the tough cases. It's what doctors call refractory chronic constipation. This is where someone has already tried at least 2 different classes of standard laxatives and nothing. They're still symptomatic, still looking for relief.
Doctors have a pretty standard playbook for this. It's called the therapeutic ladder. You start at the bottom rung, diet, lifestyle changes. If that doesn't work, you climb up to things like osmotic laxatives. Those pull more water into the gut. Still no luck, you go up again to stimulant laxatives, which, well, they stimulate movement. The problem is, for way too many people, they climb this whole ladder, get to the very top, and they're still stuck. They've run out of options.
Okay, so this is where the story gets really clever. Scientists were faced with this exact problem. What do you do when the ladder runs out? So they started thinking outside the box, and they found a totally new approach by tapping into a powerful system that's already working inside all of us right now. And that key, it turned out to be bile acids. Now, most of us, when we hear bile acids, we think about digesting fats, right? But what researchers figured out is that they have this amazing second job. They act as the body's own natural laxative. They send signals to the colon, telling it to get moving and to release more fluid. But here's the thing, our bodies are super efficient. They are the ultimate recyclers. They don't want to just waste these incredibly useful bile acids. So about 95% of them get reabsorbed and sent back to the liver through this special gateway in the gut. It's called the ileal bile acid transporter, or IBAT for short. And this is the genius hack behind Elobixibat site. The drug basically acts like a partial roadblock at that recycling gate. It blocks some of the IBAT transporters. So instead of nearly all those bile acids getting recycled, more of them continue their journey downstream into the colon. And once they're there, boom, they can do their natural laxative thing right where it's needed most. So it's a really brilliant idea on paper, right? A super clever biological workaround. But does it actually work in the real world? Let's dig into the evidence and see what the clinical trials have to say. All right, so the evidence we're looking at is really solid. It's from something called a meta-analysis, which is basically a study of studies. They pulled all the data from 6 different high-quality randomized controlled trials, and we're talking about over 2,000 patients here, all of whom had that tough, refractory constipation we were just talking about. Okay, take a look at this. It's called a forest plot, and it's a great way to see all the results at once. Each of those horizontal lines is one of the 6 studies. The vertical line in the middle, that's the no-effect line. Now, see how every single diamond and line is over to the right of that center line? That means that in every single trial, Elobixibat beat the placebo. That kind of consistency is a really, really good sign. So what does that all boil down to? Well, when you crunch all the numbers together, the result is pretty powerful. Patients on Elobixibat were more than 2.5 times more likely to be a responder compared to those taking a sugar pill. And a responder here just means someone who saw a real, meaningful, and consistent improvement in their symptoms. There's another way to think about this that's super practical. It's called the number needed to treat, or NNT. It basically answers the question, okay, how many people do we have to give this drug to for just one extra person to get better who wouldn't have otherwise? And for Elobixibat, that number is just 5. Let me tell you, in the world of medicine for chronic conditions, an NNT of 5 is really, really good. That's not some tiny marginal benefit. It means this drug is making a substantial real-world difference for people. And it wasn't just about people feeling better either. They measured concrete results. Patients taking Elobixibat had, on average, a significant increase in their weekly spontaneous bowel movements compared to the placebo group. So we're talking a measurable physical change.
Okay, so the benefits are pretty clear. But with any effective medication, you always have to ask, what's the catch? What's the trade-off? So let's talk about the other side of the coin, the side effects.
Now, the interesting thing here is that the side effects are exactly what you'd expect. They're basically a sign that the drug is working, maybe a little too well for some people. Because you're sending more of these natural stimulants to the colon, it's no surprise that the main side effects are, well, gut-related.
Specifically, when you look at the data, people taking Elobixibat were over 4 times more likely to experience diarrhea and more than twice as likely to have abdominal pain compared to the placebo group.
This table really lays out the trade-off perfectly. Remember the number needed to treat? Well, there's also a number needed to harm, or NNH. So while the NNT for a good response is 5, the NNH for diarrhea is 6. That's a really tight balance, right? You treat 5 people, 1 gets better. You treat 6 people, 1 gets diarrhea. This is the kind of benefit versus risk conversation that's so important for doctors to have with their patients. So let's pull all of this together. What does this all mean? What's the bottom line for those patients and their doctors who've climbed that whole therapeutic ladder and are just stuck?
Well, the conclusion from the researchers is pretty direct. This isn't just another laxative. The key phrase they use is mechanistically distinct. That just means it works in a completely different way. It's a brand new tool in the toolbox, specifically for those people who've already failed the conventional treatments. And hey, this isn't just some experimental drug in a lab. It's already out there. It was approved in Japan way back in 2018. It's available in other major markets, and it's becoming a new option worldwide. It's literally creating a new, higher rung on that therapeutic ladder for people who thought they had reached the end of the line.
You know, the success of a drug like this is bigger than just constipation. It really makes you think. It shows that sometimes the most groundbreaking solution isn't some totally new invention, but just a really clever way of tapping into the incredible systems our bodies already have in place. And that leaves us with a really exciting question to ponder. What other hidden pathways are just waiting to be hacked to treat other tough conditions?